This week, Poland asked a court to undo an order it received this spring. Buy 64 million doses of a vaccine it does not want. That is nearly 2 doses for every citizen, on top of millions of doses the country has already destroyed. Let's clear one thing immediately. This is not an episode about vaccines, and we are taking no side in any argument about them. The doses are legal and fully approved. Nothing in this episode questions them as medicine. And that is exactly what makes the story strange. They will be paid for, shipped, stored, and then, in all likelihood, quietly disposed of. This is an episode about a contract, one of the largest purchase contracts in European history, and about a single line that was never written into it. What happens if tomorrow turns out better than the forecast? Across Europe, by the end of 2023, an estimated 4 billion euros worth of pandemic vaccines had already gone to landfills. The bill Poland is fighting is only the newest page of that ledger. Today, we trace how an emergency froze a forecast into an obligation, why a court can only enforce that obligation, and 3 ways the missing line could have been written. Here is where the case stands, to the hour we recorded this. On the 1st of April, a court of first instance in Brussels, the first ruling, not the last word, decided that Poland must honor a COVID vaccine contract in full, take delivery of roughly 64 million doses and pay about 1.3 billion euros, plus interest and costs. Romania, sued alongside, owes about 600 million. The case was brought by Pfizer at the end of 2023, and this Monday, Poland appealed, asking the court to suspend enforcement while the appeal runs. That appeal is still open, and we won't guess how it ends. Why does a Polish vaccine dispute sit in a Belgian courtroom? Because the contract was negotiated by the European Commission on behalf of all member states, and it is governed by Belgian law. One signature in Brussels, 27 countries bound. Poland stopped taking deliveries in April 2022, arguing the pandemic had changed, that it was carrying the cost of a refugee crisis, and that the pricing abused Pfizer's dominant market position, an accusation of monopoly-style pricing. The court's answer, in essence, the contract does not care. Obligations bind. Meanwhile, the physical reality, in 2022 alone, Poland destroyed 14.8 million expired doses, 1 in 9 of all doses delivered. The unused stockpile that remained was disposed of in 2024. Pfizer, for its part, says the ruling reflects the importance of the commitments that underpinned Europe's pandemic response, and that it showed significant flexibility before going to court. To see the defect, look at how the machine was built, and be fair to the people who built it. In 2020, Europe decided to buy vaccines as one customer instead of 27 competing ones. The Commission negotiated advance purchase agreements, countries pooled their bargaining power, producers got guaranteed demand before their products even existed. For a scarce product in a panicked market, one big buyer beats a bidding war. We saw the opposite design, countries bidding against each other, fail with gas. The largest deal came in May 2021, 900 million doses firm, with an option for 900 million more, running through 2023, later stretched to 2026. It was written at the peak of uncertainty. New variants, the possibility of yearly boosters for everyone, no one able to say which fear would materialize. Poland's slice of that contract is the 64 million doses from our opening. Look at how the risk was divided. If the producer failed to deliver, there were penalties. Delivery risk sat with the company. But if the demand failed to materialize, if the world got better faster than feared, that risk sat entirely with the states. Firm volumes, fixed schedule. And 2 things were not in the text. Any mechanism to scale volumes down if demand fell, call it a shrink clause, and any free right to resell or donate the surplus, which required the producer's consent. A forecast with a signature under it. Forecast age. This one aged in about a year. By 2022, most willing arms were vaccinated, immunity was widespread, and demand collapsed across the continent, while deliveries kept arriving on the 2021 schedule. In April, Poland simply stopped accepting them. Warehouses were full, Expiry dates were ticking. A renegotiation did happen. In 2023, the Commission and Pfizer amended the deal. The remaining volume was cut by about a third per reporting, deliveries pushed out 3 more years, and member states agreed to pay a fee for every canceled dose. Note what that is: the shrink clause, written 2 years late, priced by negotiation under pressure. And note what it was not: a right. It was an offer. 4 governments formally wrote that they wanted a fairer deal. In the end, most states signed the amendment. Poland did not and stayed bound by the original text. Pfizer sued Poland and Romania over its own undelivered doses. The court then did the only thing courts do with clear text. It read it out loud and enforced it. A changed world is not a defense the contract offers. So walk the exits. Scale down, not in the text. Resell freely, restricted. Renegotiate, a favor, not a right. What remains is the one exit no contract can block: expiry and disposal. 1 dose in 9 that Poland received in 2022 ended in destruction. 4 billion euros worth ended in landfills across Europe. The incinerator became the system's relief valve. Now let's be fair to the people who built this in 2021. They've earned it. Firm volumes were not stupidity. They bought speed and priority in the scarcest market on earth. Producers built factories against those guarantees. Countries that signed firm got vaccines first. Countries that hesitated queued. The company carried real delivery risk, and it delivered. Paying for certainty was a defensible trade, possibly the right one. The defect is narrower and more damning. The downside branch was never priced out loud. The contracts were confidential. Lawmakers who asked to see them got redacted copies, prices blacked out, so no public document ever stated what an early end to the pandemic would still cost. And no scheduled review was built into the contract. No formula, no arbiter, no reopening date. The good news scenario was simply left blank, and blank text defaults to pay in full. The strongest proof that this was a design flaw, not fate, is that Europe has already built the corrected version for the next crisis. Since 2023, a program called EU FAB pays 4 manufacturers to keep production lines warm. 325 million doses a year of reserve capacity, standing ready, activated only if an emergency comes. Capacity is bought, volumes stay optional. The next crisis is covered by the new design. The last one is still being settled under the old design, and settling old text is exactly what courtrooms do. 3 ways the missing line could be written into the next emergency contract. None is free. Every price gets read out loud. Repair 1 replaces volumes with options. The state pays a premium for the right to buy doses batch by batch and confirms each batch only as real demand shows up. The forecast stops being an obligation and becomes a menu. The price. Premiums make every delivered dose more expensive. Insurance always does. In a scramble, firm buyers outrank option holders. The producer builds factories for guaranteed money first, so options trade away exactly the speed the emergency needed, and producers need capital up front. Someone still has to underwrite the factory. Repair 2 keeps firm contracts but writes the shrink clause in numbers from day 1, a volume corridor, a guaranteed minimum, a contracted maximum, and a formula between them. Cancel within the band, pay a pre-agreed step fee that declines over time. What the 2023 amendment improvised under pressure becomes a right priced in peacetime, exercised without a summit and without a lawsuit. The price. The producer prices the corridor's risk into every dose. Certainty for the buyer is revenue, uncertainty for the maker, and it invoices accordingly. Disputes migrate into the formula's inputs. What counts as demand fell? And formulas are negotiated in the same panicked weeks as everything else. Complexity costs days when days are the scarcest currency. Repair 3 pays for the factory instead of the doses. The EU FAB idea, scaled from pilot to backbone. Reserve ever-warm capacity with standing retainers. When a crisis comes, order doses at pre-agreed prices. When it doesn't, order nothing. The price you pay for idle production lines year after year, the classic insurance bill, politically framed as paying pharma for nothing. Capacity is not doses. Ramp-up still takes months, so a retainer alone is slower than a warehouse, and today's reserve, 325 million doses a year, is a fraction of pandemic scale demand. Scaling it to real size multiplies the standing bill. Every repair pays somewhere. The current design, firm volumes, locked exits, and a court at the end pays too, 1.9 billion euros across 2 countries, plus the landfills and counting. If the ruling stands, the 64 million doses will be manufactured, paid for, stored, and, in all likelihood, eventually destroyed. Every step of that journey will be lawful, and every step will follow the text. Whatever you believe about any pandemic decision, notice who wrote this particular bill, not the virus, not the court. It only read the text. The bill was written into a purchase order in 2021 in the branch nobody filled in. And that gives you a question that works on every emergency contract any government signs, for vaccines, for gas, for grain, for chips. Don't only ask what happens if things go wrong, ask what happens if things go right, if the crisis ends early, if demand halves, if the forecast breaks in our favor. Ask who holds the pen on that branch and what using that pen will cost. If the answer is, we'll renegotiate when we get there. Remember Poland. When there arrived, renegotiation was a favor, refusal was a lawsuit, and the relief valve was an incinerator. An emergency excuse is speed. It does not excuse a blank page.